My name is Robert Durso, and I'm a senior faculty member and senior director of the Golansky Institute. Today, I'm going to give a lecture on teaching the single and double rotation effectively. The first thing that I'd like to say is that rotation is one component of an overall technique. This component combines with many other components to produce speed, ease, and control at the keyboard. I hope that this lecture will provide certain suggestions and guidelines for problems that come up while teaching the rotation. The first thing we would like to discuss here is alignment. Alignment comes first before motion is possible. When we line ourselves up at the instrument, we are doing that for the purpose of the finger, hand, and arm to be at the best mechanical advantage to the instrument. The purpose for the finger, hand, and arm to be aligned is so that it can drop freely into the instrument. Let us briefly discuss the sitting height and distance from the keyboard as it is described in great detail on the first video in the Taubman tapes. The sitting height puts the playing mechanism, the finger, the hand, and the arm, in the best mechanical advantage for playing the instrument. The proper place for the alignment to be is that the forearm should be level or slightly above the surface of the white keys. A very helpful way to guide someone to this is to extend a piece of paper or a book from the white keys. Just check if they're in a general place that's correct. The proper distance from the keyboard allows for total comfort. It is not good to be too close because a situation of crowding would result. Here, I am not free to maneuver the different registers of the instrument, particularly in front of the body. If I go too far back, I would be reaching for the instrument. In this position, it's not possible for the finger, hand, and arm to drop freely into the keyboard. Let's now discuss the system of fulcrums that connect limbs to each other. First, the finger, hand, and arm and the upper arm is connected to the torso at the shoulder. It is important for the shoulder not to be too high and not to be collapsed down. It is basically in a neutral position. Following down, we go to the elbow. The elbow is where the finger, hand, and arm connect to the upper arm. The elbow should be in a position where lifting and dropping the finger, hand, and arm is done with ease. If the elbow is too far out, the finger, hand, and arm will not go up and down freely. If the elbow is too collapsed in, the same situation will result. A neutral position allowing for the finger, hand, and arm to go up and down is crucial to the success of the playing. Following down to the wrist is the fulcrum from which the hand moves. It's important to realize that the wrist can neither be too high nor too low. Either situation will prevent the finger, hand, and arm being unified. Following down, we have the main knuckle joint. This is an important joint because it is where the fingers move from. The fingers move up and down in one piece from the main knuckle. In the natural hand position, you will see there are middle knuckles to the fingers. Those middle knuckles should be preserved in the playing. They should neither be straightened out nor curled. The last joint here is important not to collapse in nor to curl. So we have basically the natural position here. Once you attain the alignment for playing, the next step is to play one key at a time. The finger, hand, and arm go up and down together and descend into the key. There are several things to master here. It's important that when you're on the bottom of the key, You're not gripping the fingers to stay there. You're neither letting go of the bottom and hovering the weight up. So we call this easy solid, or being on the bottom of the key effortlessly. At this point, I'd like to clarify the rotational movement. In showing a student the rotational movement, it's very helpful to locate the arm in front of the body, like this. I would turn the palm towards the body and towards the floor. That will produce a rotational movement. Remember that the finger, hand, and arm must all move together, towards the body, towards the floor. It's very much like turning a tennis racket. The head of the tennis racket stays in alignment. Don't always start with a large motion, especially if the student is injured. The issue here is feeling connected, finger, hand, and arm, and free to the elbow. This can be achieved with a small motion. The preparatory motion refers to the motion that begins a passage and also to the first part of a motion in the double rotation. A single rotation functions to accommodate changes of direction, such as a trill. This is a movement from left to right and right to left. The double rotation consists of two motions, the first being a preparatory motion followed by a playing swing. I like to show the rotation starting in the descending direction. I like to start with 4 fingers and avoid using the thumb. The reason for avoiding the use of the thumb is because we would need the in and out motions in order to play the thumb. It is much simpler to deal with just the rotation. I like to play straight down and show the rotation over a distance, say to the second finger. Sometimes it's easier for the student to understand rotation over a distance than it is to understand rotation to the very next note. As soon as possible, we like to add the preparatory motion. Let's discuss the preparatory motion. Remembering that the finger, hand, and arm always move together, otherwise we would have isolations, we have to begin the process of the preparatory motion. If I'm going to the 5th finger, the finger, hand, and arm turn to the left all together, and I swing to play to the right. Remembering that when you do the preparatory motion, nothing is resting on the keys. The finger, hand, and arm all lift together and all play together. I'd like to demonstrate what it looks like when someone rests the unplayed fingers on the keyboard and does a preparatory motion. And in the other direction. You can see that the hand is not ready to play the next note. This will unify the mechanism in both directions, toward the 5 and toward the thumb. I'd like to discuss some things that can go wrong when you move from note to note. One of the key things that can go wrong in turning is pushing off from the bottom of the key. Let me show what that looks like. I go down into the key, and instead of turning, I just push up vertically in order to get to the next key. Another thing that can happen is actually invisible. I can go into the key and squeeze the finger that I'm standing on, which makes it very difficult to turn the finger, hand, and arm. If you see tightness in the finger, hand, and arm, you might ask the student if they are gripping on the bottom of the key. Another thing that can go wrong is any fulcrum is vulnerable to go out of alignment. Some common things that happen starting from the elbow are that the elbow initially is held too far out. When the elbow is held too far out, it is also very difficult to rotate. When the elbow is held too far in or collapsed, it is also difficult to turn. As people turn, sometimes they raise their wrist, like this. Sometimes they turn and drop the wrist. All of these defects break the unity of the finger, hand, and arm. Sometimes people come from a tradition of high main knuckles, like this. And although you might have solved that in the basic position, as they turn, they raise that set of knuckles. It's very important that that set of knuckles remain in the proper alignment. Other things people do when they turn, related to the fingers, are the following. People will turn and straighten their fingers, like that. People will turn and curl their fingers, like that. It's important to realize that the fingers must stay in the same shape as they are in the natural hand position. Make sure that the thumb comes along with everything, like this. Sometimes it looks tight from the forearm because the thumb is holding back. Train the person to bring the thumb along with everything else. Make sure the hand is free and turning. Always go back to in front of the body and feel that freedom and ease to the elbow. You can see here that the hand is turning along with the forearm and the fingers. Always ask if everything is moving freely all the way to the elbow. To begin the process of teaching rotation on the four fingers in a descending pattern in the right hand, we're going to add the preparatory motion. I like to use a rule of 3 versus 4 in determining the direction of the preparatory motion. If I start from a neutral position, the preparatory motion and single rotation into the second note will comprise 3 movements. So, being neutral, if I'm going to move from 5 to 4, I'm going to move to the left, which is the first movement. The second movement plays the 5th finger, and the third movement plays the 4th finger. If I move in the wrong direction, I will actually have 4 movements that get me into the second note. I will demonstrate the 4 movements. 1, 2, 3, 4. So clearly it is more efficient to use 3 movements from the neutral position. 1, 2, 3. Here are things to look for and suggestions to make when people have difficulty turning the playing unit freely. One thing to look for is if they are allowing the rotation to turn on the fingertip, meaning the finger cannot stay in the same place and have the person feel the rotation. As the finger, hand, and arm turns, the fingertip will go to a different place of contact. Sometimes what's very important is to make sure that they're doing a rotational movement versus a shifting movement. In order to do that, I like to take the motion in 2 steps. First the playing, and then the turning. It's in this moment that you can see whether there is truly a rotational turn, or very often what people are actually doing is just shifting across. We do have the walking hand and arm working, which is discussed in future lectures, but right now it's very important to get the rotational movement as purely a turning motion as possible. After clarifying the preparatory motion, it's important to make this motion as small as possible. As such, from the fourth finger to the third finger, we have a double rotation. A double rotation means that I'm going to make a preparatory motion in the direction of the finger I just played, and then a swinging motion to play the next key. It is then another double rotation from the third finger to the second finger. Preparatory motion to the right, playing motion to the left. It's important to remember on the double rotation that although the motion goes in two different directions, it is felt as one continuous motion. To clarify the beginning, we have a preparatory motion and a single rotation into the second note. Single rotations have a moment of playing and an immediate continuation, which gives you the swing into the next key. That's why we call it a change of direction. In some instances, people will need to be instructed in the walking hand and arm. The walking hand and arm is the part of the technique that allows for the finger, hand, and arm to fall to the bottom of the key effortlessly. As you rotate into the key, it is important that the key go to the bottom. Let me demonstrate the walking hand and arm. This motion is combined with the rotational motion. So you begin with a preparatory motion and a single rotation. And when you play, the finger, hand, and arm is falling to the bottom of the key. Falling to the bottom of the key. Falling to the bottom of the key. One of the telltale signs that the walking hand and arm is not functioning is when no sound is made. It is just a turning motion without the part that falls to the bottom. I will demonstrate what that's like. You can hear the inconsistency in the sound. When it's done correctly, each sound will sound full, focused, and unpushed. I'd like to discuss the proper landing on each finger. The proper landing would center the fingertip over the key. Some of the common errors are when the rotation does not center the fingertip over the key, meaning it either falls too far over, and I'll demonstrate that. You can see it leaves me in a tilted position towards the left. I'm not in the center of my fingertip. I can also land on the right side of the fingertip, which would tilt the hand in the other direction. So you can see that the rotation has not allowed the finger, hand, and arm to arrive solidly on the next key. The proper way is to center it over the middle of the fingertip and feel that there is no tilting to the outside or inside of the hand. I'd like to discuss training the fingers to move in connection with the rotational movement. The purpose of moving the fingers is to move the fingers in a coordinated way with the hand and the arm. It's important that the fingers lift in the same direction as the hand and forearm are rotating. One of the pitfalls is that people lift the fingers to the ceiling. I will demonstrate that. In lifting the fingers to the ceiling, they are no longer connected to the hand and forearm, the rotational movement. They are isolated from that movement. As you lift the fingers, the hand and the forearm are responding to the lifting of the fingers. You can see the proper lifting now. The fingers have a movement, the hand is immediately turning together with the forearm to accommodate the lifting of the fingers. You begin to associate the movement with all the remaining fingers, the hand and the arm. That begins to take the emphasis off of pivoting on the standing finger, particularly of a double rotation. Let me show you what I mean. Preparatory motion, single rotation. I'm now going to make a double rotation. If the fingers lift to the ceiling, once again I will be disconnected. However, if I do it properly, you will begin to notice that the tilting on the standing finger becomes much, much smaller. We will talk about minimizing the double rotation in a moment, but it's important to realize that the standing finger is not used to push off of. Neither should it let go of the bottom of the key during turning. Those are two very common situations. People will either dig in as they turn or let go. Try to look from behind the piano as they turn to see if the key actually comes up as they turn. That can be a very helpful aid in determining the success of the rotation. Make sure that the fingers do not straighten during the turning process. Make sure that the fingers do not curl during the turning process. Although there is a response on the standing finger, we are no longer tilting, pivoting, or actively using that finger. It is much more akin to a balance than anything else. One thing to watch for is that sometimes people have the perception they're moving their fingers. However, what they're doing is just moving the hand and the arm more. Visually, it's confusing because the fingers do visually look like they are going pretty far away from the keys, although there is no visible movement from the finger. A helpful thing to do is take a tabletop and just learn the coordination of the fingers lifting from the main knuckle. Then going back to the instrument and feeling it the same way while coordinating it with the hand and forearm rotation. Let's now talk about releasing. If we are playing rotationally, we also must release rotationally. What does that mean? As I rotate into the second note, the fifth finger is going to need to release. It releases as part of the rotation, together with the hand and the forearm. When it releases, it moves closer to the finger just played. It's important to realize that it must move there naturally. If it moves too close, you will have a condition of crowding. I will show that. Where the finger is pulled up against the standing finger. That's not a very good thing to have happen. If the finger does not release and move over at all, and remains on the finger just played, that is a type of isolation also. The weight is still somewhat centered on the unplayed finger. Therefore, the playing finger is not receiving full support from the hand and the forearm. So releasing means that the playing finger will move closer to the finger just played. You can see that none of my fingers are on the notes that they had previously played. Neither are my fingers crowded together in an effort to over-release. Let's discuss the thumb. It's important to train the thumb to move together with the hand and the forearm, and also for the thumb to discover its unique movement in combination with the hand and the forearm. Let me demonstrate what it looks like to move the thumb together with the hand and the forearm with no thumb movement at all. The thumb moves from this knuckle joint, and it gets closer to the knuckle of the second finger. Try teaching this very slowly. And as soon as possible, incorporate the hand and the forearm as a response to the lifting of the thumb in the rotational movement. So that there's a combination of finger and arm here. That movement will become very close to the key. I will try to demonstrate what it's like to play with no thumb motion. And now with a thumb motion, together with the hand and the forearm. Let's discuss the timing of the rotation. The timing of a single rotation is that there is a moment of playing followed by an immediate continuation, sending you in the opposite direction to the next note, as in the preparatory motion in single rotation to the second note in the opening of the pattern. It's important to realize that you must have a moment where you play, but that the motion doesn't stop there. It plays and continues, giving you the swing to the next note. The timing of the double rotation is a bit more complex. There is a chant, swing, play, down, that helps time the amount of time on the bottom of the key one must remain before beginning the preparatory motion to the next key. If you say the chant and simultaneously feel that nothing is happening on the bottom of the key, you will be successful in timing a double rotation. I'll demonstrate timing the rotation with the chant. First of all, it's preparatory motion and swing. Preparatory motion, swing, play down. Swing, play down. Swing, play down. You can see during the words that I don't do anything on the bottom of the key. I don't push off, I don't let go, I don't tilt, I don't pivot. It is truly a moment of complete repose, a moment where nothing is happening. One of the things to remember in the double rotation is that the moment you decide to move, you go in one continuous motion, although you're going in two directions. I'll demonstrate that again. When I go from the fourth finger to the third finger, I'm turning to the right in the preparatory motion and playing to the left in the playing motion. A very common error is that people stop in the preparatory motion before going back in the playing motion. That would disturb momentum and definitely cut down on speed as you go faster. Let's begin to discuss the minimizing of the double rotation. The fingers become very important in minimizing the double rotation. If the fingers do not assume their rightful role, it will be impossible to minimize the double rotation. What will happen is that the finger will always tilt, like this, in going to the next key. Also, the unplayed fingers will begin to feel that they are in the way if the playing fingers do not move, like this. Very often, if you see that the fingers that are non-played are in the way, the problem is that the fingers have not been moved properly. What is the proper amount that the fingers should be moved? The proper amount is the degree that the fingers feel alive, yet still connected to the hand and the forearm. This is the concept of the proportion of finger to arm movement. I recommend feeling this key to key versus doing something in general, like telling a student to move their fingers more, or then move your arm more. That results in a merry-go-round week after week. The person comes back, the fingers were moving too much. They go back and they do go to the arm, they come back the next week, and the arm is moving too much. It's a very difficult merry-go-round to get out of. What I suggest is the following. Train the finger and hand and arm to move precisely from note to note. Let's take a look at it from the fourth to the third finger. If the fingers move properly, they will move in the same direction as the standing finger. But the standing finger has no active role in this process. It is just merely a balance. The fingers are lifting, the hand in the forearm is rotating. The fingers feel alive and close to the key. Also, avoid exaggerating the finger motion. If you exaggerate the finger motion, there are only two options available. Either the finger will become isolated from the hand in the forearm, or the large finger motion will trigger the hand and forearm to make a larger motion than needed. The fingers will feel alive and close to the key, like this. They will not look like this. It's important to train all the remaining fingers in the direction you're playing. For instance, if I'm on the fourth finger, I'm not merely lifting 3 to go to 3. I'm lifting 3, 2, and 1 together as a unit. I'm swinging back and dropping the third finger. Now that I'm on the third finger, it's important to clarify the next unit lifted. The next unit lifted is the second finger and the thumb. They lift together in the same direction as the standing finger with the hand and the forearm. You may suggest that the person feel that the preparatory motion becomes smaller. That simple suggestion can be very helpful. They're traveling less far back to the right in order to play to the left. One thing I can suggest is making a comparison to standing. If you're standing on your right leg, that can become a balance for the lifting of the left leg. The right leg is not actively moving the left leg. Yet it is very important that it be there because it enables the left leg to lift. It is the balance for the left leg. The same thing for the double rotation. If I'm standing on 4, that's the balance for the lifting of 3, 2, and 1. I'm not actively using that finger. I'm not turning it, I'm not pushing off from it, and I'm not letting go. That finger is in total repose. When I go to lift, nothing should be disturbed on the standing finger. There are no sensations there other than the sensation of balance. Sometimes we use terms like dead on the bottom or in total repose. As you perfect the double rotation, it will make it possible to be more key sensitive versus movement sensitive. You've spent a lot of time training the movements note to note. Now it is time to concentrate on the sensation of landing or playing and try to see if the movements are happening automatically. As you do that, it will become more and more internalized to the point of being invisible. The things that are invisible are mostly the double rotations. The single rotations, say in trills, tremolo, are somewhat visible. There are certain pitfalls to doing the timing correctly. Most people never stay long enough before beginning the preparatory motion. Sometimes they can't feel it, and they actually have to use their eyes to see that they remain in complete repose before lifting for the next key. Use everything you can to help. Use the chant. Explain the feeling on the finger of the standing finger. Use eyesight. Let them see that that finger is not tilting over to its side. Ultimately, it is the feeling of total repose or halt on that finger which is most important. Why is the timing important? If the timing is not correct, it can actually go into speed backwards, where the emphasis is in the preparatory motion and not in the playing motion. We've all been there where we see students think that they've understood the rotation and demonstrate it for us this way. What's happening here is that the preparatory motion has started so quickly that most of the time weighting is in the air in the preparatory motion. What we really want is the weighting to be felt on the bottom of the key. So the motion does not belong to the standing finger, it belongs to the finger being played. When you say the chant swing play down, it tells you when to move to the next key. This ultimately produces an interaction of the single and double rotation, which is crucial to playing in speed. We know that the finger, hand, and arm turn together to do the rotation. In the ascending direction, we have a complicated situation. The upper arm becomes very crucial to the success of the rotation in the ascending direction. When we turn, the elbow must have a give in it to accommodate the turning of the finger, hand, and arm. When the elbow gives, there will be sympathetic sensations in the upper arm. The important thing to remember is that the upper arm is not the initiator of the motion. We've seen all too often people doing the rotation in what we call the chicken wing style, this way. The upper arm should respond to the turning of the forearm, not the other way around. Otherwise, it's a rotation of the entire arm. Something very helpful to help differentiate the sensation of the upper arm and the forearm is to have the students stand up. Ask them to rotate their forearms and notice that the elbow is actually changing position. Then ask them to rotate their upper arms. They will feel the difference between rotating the forearm as a unit and having the upper arm respond, and initiating from the upper arm, which is a rotation of the whole arm. In the end, that elbow motion becomes a give. It just accommodates the rotation. Very often it's helpful to try 2 to 5 over a distance to check whether that is operating properly. Remember that in order to add the thumb to these 4 fingers, we must move in on the second finger. Don't teach the rotation from this position to the thumb. So if you'd like, you could position the student further in and practice the rotation to the thumb. Remember that in order to add the thumb to the ascending direction, you will need to show the out motion to the second finger. From this point, it is possible to begin adding the in and out motions. The in and out motions are explained in video 2 of the Taubman tapes. Once the student can successfully do the in and out in 5-finger position on white keys, it is time to teach the crossing over and under in a scale. Once there's mastery in crossing over and under, it is now time to apply the rotation to passages in a piece of music. I have some suggestions for applying it in music. Try to assess the student's level. Try not to give the student a more complex piece than they are able to digest. Some suggestions with advanced pianists may be Mozart sonatas or concertos. With intermediate students, perhaps a sonatina. And with younger students, age-appropriate and skill-level appropriate repertoire is what's needed. I'd like to discuss some common errors in applying the rotation. The most common error that I see is applying the rotation before it's minimized. Having wildly large motions and trying to read the piece and learn the piece all at one time is far too complex for a student to digest at one time. That's why the conversation about minimizing the double rotation is so important. Once you minimize the double rotation, once you add the in and out, you should be really very, very close to how the mechanism works in speed. An appropriate size to apply the rotation to a passage would be about this size. Still somewhat visible, yet fairly minimized. Not invisible or internalized completely, but not wildly large either. I would like to suggest taking the passage together with the student and analyzing where the single and double rotations are. Sometimes it's helpful to put an X over the note of the standing finger, which will remind the student that is a note they must stomp on. Also important that the motions be learned in an even tempo. Very often I have seen people apply the rotation to passages, playing the rotation like this. Where the single rotations are faster than the double rotations. My suggestion is to slow down the single rotation to accommodate the overall tempo, so that the tempo of the piece is even. Sometimes this is very confusing to the student because the physical rhythm is not an even rhythm. It's important for the timing that they understand the differences between single and double rotations. Remember that determining the single rotation is based on the sequence of fingers. Where the finger numbers change direction will always be a single rotation. Where the finger numbers go in the same direction, you will have double rotations. It's very helpful to sort this out in a passage before even applying the rotational movements. Remember that all intervals and octaves and chords are double rotations. They play towards the thumb side and balance straight down. Let's summarize what we covered today. First, we looked at the basic alignment to the instrument. And from there, we defined the preparatory motion, a single rotation, and a double rotation. We looked at how these skills function, how they are minimized, how they are combined with other things, and how they are applied to repertoire. I took a look at many of the pitfalls and common errors encountered when teaching single and double rotation. I hope that this has been helpful and you will use this as a resource in your teaching for future years. Thank you very much.